Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine War hits and losses video for the 29th of November 2025. A broad overview of what's been happening along the front lines and in Ukraine over the last 24 hours or so. This is going to be an information-packed video. There is an absolute ton of stuff that's happened in the last 24 hours. Ukraine have received one of the biggest attacks from Russia. 600 odd drones and 36 missiles, something like that, slamming into or attempting to slam into particularly Kyiv. And then Ukraine has been involved in all sorts. We've got burning facilities in Yelabuga, perhaps drone associated with the drone manufacturing there, Shahid drone manufacturing. Wow. We've got 2 oil tankers struck. We've got oil refineries hit, just crazy stuff, rockets blowing up, just loads of data to go through. Just before we start, I want to say the reason why this is late is because my son's football was cancelled, both of them. I had twin boys, but I had to go to hospital instead. You know, many of you will know, I had to have a prostate biopsy and the results came back. This is linked to Ukraine, just hang on. So anyway, for those that care, results were I've got prostate cancer, 3+3 on a Gleason scale, which is a minimal amount. So they're not going to do anything. They just carry on looking at it. I have, blood tests and MRIs and whatever on a continual basis going forward, just to look at it. In Germany, apparently they don't even call that cancer now because it's like it's not severe enough and etc. So not worried at all. But here's a bit that's connected to Ukraine. If you remember, when I went last time, I did a whole video on my experience because one of the kind of urologist doctors was Ukrainian. I had my Ukrainian top on, and with my legs akimbo, I was talking Ukraine and my YouTube channel and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I can't believe this. You know, here you are rummaging around my back passage and we're talking about the Ukraine war on my YouTube channel, and you're going to be watching my YouTube channel thinking, I know that guy, but mainly from what his backside looks like. Anyway, so I did that video and I had the same doctor today, not the Ukrainian one, but the main guy that was doing the rummaging. And he was like, oh, I remember you, blah, blah, blah. He said, your video was passed around the entire department. So I'm kind of like famous in the department for doing the video on my experience. He said it was really good. It's really great to talk about it and all that kind of stuff. So it's like absolutely fantastic. Went in, had the news I was expecting, which is pretty good news. Although it's not no cancer, it's like the minimum amount, and that's basically what I thought it would be, and that's absolutely nothing to worry about. But just really cool that they all watched my video where I was joking about these my YouTube channel and yeah, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, let's get to a very information dense video. If you haven't done so already, please remember to like, subscribe and share. That is super important for the channel. Thank you to all of those who have already done so. Let's get into the long weeds of it. And my goodness, there are many. I interrupted myself. There are many very long weeds. Anyway, let's get to it. I'm obviously too excited. Right. We have the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply to these numbers. 910 personnel dropped down. 1 single tank down at a very low number. 15 armored combat vehicles. That's actually quite high comparatively to what we've seen. We had a fairly high number yesterday as well, so that's interesting. 3 artillery systems is one of the lowest numbers I've seen in that category. No MLRS or air defense systems. We have 64 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So not a huge number of pieces of equipment across the categories. Just interesting that armored combat vehicles is a fairly high. 2 pieces of special equipment. We're going to see a montage of more pieces of kit that I wonder whether they would be included in special equipment or not included at all, or this and that. We also have some air defense systems that should be included. So they're not here. They could have been on yesterday's figures, or they could be figures that are going to be added to tomorrow. We shall see. Anyway, start with kind of personnel issues. And unfortunately, we hear that another, I was reporting yesterday that there was evidence of 5 Ukrainian POWs being lined up, interrogated, and then shot by the Russians. That's a war crime. And yet another war crime. Russian troops execute a captured Ukrainian soldier after beating him with a rifle. So there are just war crime after war crime after war crime being registered. And, you know, when you are having a war that is seen from above with these drones, you know, nothing is, well, obviously there are some things that are not captured, but so much of this war is captured. It's going to be very hard, I think, for the Russians to hide from these war crimes. Okay, what do we have here? So we can confirm to, okay, this was it. So reminding myself, I often talk about, I report to you on certain things happening. And I say, right, we don't have the evidence for this yet, but the Ukrainians have claimed this, or the Russians have claimed this. And then it could be that in this case, something like 8 months later, evidence then comes out about the claim. So we can confirm today through killed in action lists that the reports about how hard of a hit on the 35th Assault Brigade's, I think that's what OMBL stands for, headquarters this year was not an exaggeration. 2 lieutenant colonels and 2 captains killed along with a lieutenant. So this is going back to February the 8th, where you come full circle here, or you know, you finally get the confirmation of the claims. An airstrike on the Russian underground bunker of the 35th Russian Brigade in Seledovo. Now, I reported that at the time. This is when you had activity much further southeast of Pokrovsk. You had Seledovo, that was one of these areas that was taken over by the Russians, and the Russians had control of that. And actually, they were using that as a kind of launch pad for areas either to the west or north into Pokrovsk. And they obviously had some HQs for their forces there in this kind of staging environment. And one of them was hit. And as I said, I reported it. As stated by the Ukrainian source associated with the Ukrainian military aviation, the strike was carried out with the help of a 900-kilogram bomb or bombs. If so, this will be the first publicly known case of these bombs being used. So really big bombs hitting a Russian force concentration, but actually command and control node. That's the important part. And then the Ukrainians then read in you know, KIA killed in action lists that come out much later that, you know, these 2 commanders were killed here, these 2 commanders, so on and so forth. It's like, yeah, well, we told you we hit them. So 2 lieutenant colonels, 2 captains, and a lieutenant were killed in that strike there, and possibly other soldiers too. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting to add that, just to give you this sense that, you know what, every day I report stuff like this, and you know, the question is, do we trust what the Ukrainians say? And actually, more often than not, the evidence does come out. Here's some more evidence here of claims of things getting blown up, and then videos coming out subsequently. So I reported to you that the book M1, book M2, Tor M2. I said the other day that air defense systems were damaged. And they say damaged because it's difficult to know because the drones cut out. But I think these are significant drones being used here. So it's likely that damaged is an understatement, and they could well be completely destroyed. A total cost of these is 60 million together. But here we have I don't know exactly where this was. Unmanned Systems Forces. I can't remember where this was. But anyway, here we have a video of these systems being hit, and, you know, really useful degradation of Russian air defenses here. You've got 3 fairly significant bits of kit, and I assume that these, as mentioned, are not your just simple FPV drones going in to hit them. These look like the visuals you get off an FP2 drone, to be honest, or similar. So is it like the Beaver drone or whatever, that rather than having a 2, 4, 5 kilogram warhead, these things have got really significant warheads, and that's much more likely to see the end of those 3 bits of kit. What else do we have? So I showed you this on my live stream last night. I had a great live stream. Well, I don't know if it's great. I'd had a bottle of wine and thought it was a good idea to do a live stream. Turned out 2 hours later, I was still going. So the Navy destroyed the enemy's command. So Ukrainian Navy destroyed the enemy's command and control point, storage sites for an Orion attack drones, and several air defense facilities, including Tor M2, Pantsir S1, some more air defense systems being hit in Saki airfield. So the other night, I reported the other morning that Saki airfield was hit, and then lo and behold, we get the video footage that subsequently comes out to confirm the claims. So the Zu-23-2 installation based on a KAMAZ was also hit. So kind of auto cannon on the back of, or like a heavy anti-aircraft cannon on the back of a truck base chassis was hit. So the question is, how do they register these bits of kit? Well, some of them, like that's going to be an air defense system. Pantsir and the Buk M2 and the Tor M2 are air defense systems, so they'll be included on the air defense stats. But then, you know, what do you do about command and control points and storage sites and so on and so forth? So they probably won't be included, but some bits of kit like radars might well come under special equipment on the general staff list. Anyway, let's have a look at the video footage. So there you've got a radar system for air defense, I think. That looks like the Pantsir to me. So the others might have been books, and then, or the Tor, sorry. So this one here, although it's just a few seconds, right? This is incredibly important. So if this is something like an FP2 drone and it has 105 kilogram capacity, it is wanging its way into what looks like the air traffic control point for an airfield, right? And if that is the case, which I think it is, then that's potentially knocking out an airfield. So just a few seconds on this video could represent a really significant hit to Russia's aviation capabilities on the peninsula of Crimea. Just pretty incredible here. You know, that, bang, that's gone, you would argue. Then we're not quite sure what these other places are. That one could be the air traffic control or similar, unless it's a command node. I mean, who knows exactly what is being hit here, but that looks like a significant, and you just get a couple of seconds, that looks like a significant target to be hitting. And you might have not just the infrastructure. So say this is an aviation, you know, an airbase control tower, something like that. It's the infrastructure that goes, but if you hit people as well, you know, that could also be very niche personnel. But I don't know, or it could not be that. You know, there's mention that one of these is an Orion, so the larger drone, similar to the MQ-9 Reaper that the Americans use or have been using. The Orion facility was hit, so I don't know. Anyway, then we flash to other places, and we seem to see an air defense missile very close to that. And then we go on, and there's another facility hit there, another facility hit here. I presume these are the Orion ones, so on and so forth. So, you know, and then that right at the end, I think, is your Zu-23. So there's the autocannon just on the back there. It's very blurry, right in the back of that KAMAZ truck. And then you have the personnel nearby as well, who might have escaped unscathed, or they may not have done, as the drone flies into that KAMAZ truck. So just that one video, you're thinking, wow, okay, Tor M2, Pantsir S1, Zu-23-2, and then command and control points. What does that mean? Storage sites for Orion, attack drones. Okay, that's good. And several air defense facilities. I mean, you know, anyway, I think that is the sort of video that we like seeing on a daily basis. Certainly I do. Now, in terms of other regular kind of frontline equipment, I think this video is pretty indicative. This is Ukraine's 100th Mechanized Brigade Cursed Empire unit destroying Russian logistics on the Konstantinivka front, including 5 motorcycles, 6 vehicles, 4 soldiers, a truck, a tank, and a quad bike, according to the brigade. So the idea here, the reason I'm including this is, you know, when we look at the general staff figures and you're thinking, all right, there's 1 tank, okay, and that could be the tank that's the single tank that's on the list. And then you've got, you know, essentially the rest of it is unarmored. Like the amount of unarmored vehicles that the Russians are using to do their thing, you know, we see that on a daily basis where, okay, the numbers weren't huge today, 64, but sometimes they're over 100. And that's made up of, usually these FPV drone strikes on these things like, look, that's a Lada Niva by the looks of it, getting banjaxed, and then motorcycles, etc., etc. Okay, then we're going to go on to some other news from yesterday, which was an RS-28 Sarmat, the Satan II, yet again, because it's not the first time this missile has failed. It spectacularly blew up Yasno Cosmodrome test site in the Orenburg region yesterday. Russians having a bit of an embarrassing time of it there. Let's watch it from the beginning here as we see it go up. And although what goes up must come down, you're not expecting it to come down quite so quickly and spectacularly. But just after launch, it kind of does a switcheroo, reverses itself, and then some kind of booster flies off, and the bad boy comes back down to ground with rather an impressive bang. And then after the explosion, there's a big plume of smoke. As you can see, that's a big old explosion there. That is purple in nature, indicating some serious chemical composition in that. That is what took place in Orenburg yesterday. All of this kind of activity, where the Russians have a disaster with rockets and missiles being tested, and the Cosmodrome the day before falling apart, meaning for the first time in 61 years, or first time since 1961, I think it was, actually, they can't send someone to space. All that kind of stuff is, showing that the Russians are in a spot of bother, but also this costs Russia. This is not good news. They need to do more R&D, or they need to fix things, or they need to do this, or their capabilities aren't going to be good enough there. I mean, this is all good news in one way or another for the Ukrainians. So here you have the missile going awry from a different point of view, and pretty spectacular mishap there for the Russians, resulting in, as mentioned, a very purple plume of smoke. Locals near the town of Yasny report loud explosion was heard, followed by a cloud of violet-covered smoke rising over the test site. They say a missile apparently detonated mid-air. Not apparently, we saw it. And there it is, the smoke over the area being caused by that explosion from afar, new from the Orenburg region. So that took place yesterday. Just to go back to some other bits and pieces, let's have a look at aviation, guided glide bombs again. Now, unfortunately, the Russians do seem to have this big advantage in aviation with regard to these bombs. Not for the first time, we see a huge explosion and a massive shockwave coming out from the use of a 3,000-kilogram bomb dropped near Pokrovsk. It's believed to be a 3,000-kilogram aerial bomb used to destroy one of the remaining logistical routes used by Ukraine in that section of the front. I mean, this is what the Ukrainians are up against, and that asymmetry, I think, is being used to great effect by the Russians. Really is a shame that they are able to use their aviation so frequently and to such an effect. Even if you think, well, they're not the most accurate bombs, and quite often they miss, or they're dropped on their own territories or whatever, yeah, fair enough. But when you're throwing 270 of these down at the Ukrainians a day, it doesn't matter if like 50 of them go awry. 1 in 5 of them go awry. That's not a problem, because my goodness, you got a lot of bombs that won't go awry and do hit the target. Right, just kind of, instead of Russia on fire, Kyiv on fire. Now, although Kyiv was attacked last night, earlier in the day, there was a massive explosion, and I don't know what happened. It was the incident occurred in the garages on Bogestraysk Street, right next to the petrol station and the school stadium. Huge explosion there. Hopefully that wasn't to do with the war, and it was more to do with some health and safety issue or something. Right, just this is, take it for what it is, a view of someone, but it is someone in the Ukrainian armed forces that has something to do with the war. Ukraine needs to hold out for another 6 to 8 months, says Major General of the Reserve Krivonis, on the possible end to the war. Quote, this term may be quite realistic, provided the systemic pressure on the Russian economy continues. So lots of people talk about, which side has time on their side. And I think you can build up a case that both sides benefit from a quick end or a slow end. I mean, there are different ways of building these arguments up, but I think you can make a pretty good case that actually Russia would rather this came to an end sooner rather than later, because economically they're in a very precarious position, and also they need to hit while the iron is hot with regard to the corruption scandal and with regard to where Trump is in terms of his popularity. So he's sinking in the polls in the United States. He's involved in the Epstein scandals. You need them to be working for you. The Russians need the Americans to be working for them right now, because, or at least now is the most likely period that they can get the US to do their heavy lifting for them. And we'll come to that a little bit later in the last section of the video. But I think it's interesting. He says, look, 6 to 8 months and Russia will be in trouble. And I think there's some merit in that argument. But again, that's the sort of thing that people have been saying for a long time. They're saying, the Russians are on the verge of collapsing economically. Well, it hasn't happened yet, but actually, I genuinely believe that is much more likely the case now than any time previously. Okay, we're going to have a section on the 2 tankers that were struck. So it appears that they were both struck now, we understand, by maritime drones, and that's a different account to what was originally coming out, which is, okay, you had these 2 Shadow Fleet tankers that at least one of them was flagged, Gambian flagged, suddenly, blew up or were on fire yesterday evening. And it was initially first thought that one hit a mine, but the other was attacked by 5 maritime drones. I think we're now hearing from the Ukrainians themselves that they were both attacked by maritime drones. I was talking in my live stream last night that Ukraine need to be careful. These are legitimate targets if they are kind of Russian owned, and this is then essentially an attack on Russia. If these are owned by third-party countries or entities that aren't necessarily to do with the war, although they might be profiting off Russia's oil, like, it's not illegal to do so. It might be against sanctions, but it's not like illegal. And that's an important distinction. And if you start blowing up these things, then you are bringing in other nations, and it's a bit controversial, because then Russia says, well, you've done that to us, we can start blowing up British and Norwegian grain ships going into the port of Odessa. So you need to be careful. But I do think these are probably legitimate targets. One, they were empty, it appears, and going on the way back to Novorossiysk in the Black Sea. 2, I mean, the key part is that they are supposedly part of the Shadow Fleet, which is essentially the Russian. Whether it's immediately obvious or not, the understanding is that they are Russian owned and therefore legitimate targets. I was just, sounding a bit of caution last night, because you start blowing up tankers in the Black Sea near Turkey, and it could be seen as controversial. Now, 2 Russian Shadow Fleet tankers caught fire in the Black Sea off Turkey after explosions, with all 25 crew evacuated from the Kairos, heading to Novorossiysk, and 20 safe aboard the Virat, struck 35 miles offshore, Turkish Transport Ministry reported. And we can go back and look at the original claims, but I think it's now understood that they were both struck by drones. Second oil tanker has gone up in flames in the Black Sea. Both ships have been identified as the MT Kairos and the MT Virat. The destination of both oil tankers is the Russian port of Novorossiysk, which would then indicate that both were empty. So you're less likely to get a huge environmental catastrophe as a result of hitting these, because they're returning to get filled up. Shortly after crossing the Bosphorus north of Istanbul, they were struck by USVs. Both ships are totally engulfed in fires and abandoned by the crews. It's only a question of time until they sink. It appears that Ukraine has declared open season for Russian Shadow Fleet oilers, and that is a shift, right? So last night, as I said, so much happened in the last 24 hours. This is a significant shift for the Ukrainians, targeting Black Sea Fleet oil tankers very explicitly and directly. And we understand that they might have a surplus of USVs, the Ukrainians, because we heard previously that they changed the regulations that they could sell certain weapons on the open market abroad to bring some income back into Ukraine if they were weapons they don't need to use themselves on the front line. And one of the things they suggested were these drones, these USVs, like the Magura 5, Magura 7s, whatever, which would indicate that actually they have built too many than what they can use. And I've been thinking, well, you just send like 50 of these all at once at, say, Novorossiysk port. But it could be that actually every time you send them, you can only send a certain amount. Then there might be a maximum bandwidth or whatever it is. Operators, signals, whatever it is, you can't send 50 all at once. You can maybe only send 5 here and 5 there. Whatever the reasons are, we haven't seen like huge flotillas of these things going at the Russians. But it would indicate to me that they probably have quite a few of them, and they're probably looking around thinking, well, what can we use these on? And they've been toying with the idea of hitting, maybe, I'm just speculating here, but maybe they were toying with the idea of hitting these tankers, and then it's all happening. The US is trying to stop the war to the advantage of Russia. So Ukraine need to wrest back some advantage and maybe hurt Russia economically and do that quickly. And this could be what is the manifestation of that. Oh my goodness, we've got a bunch of drones. Let's hit these ships. And then that sends a signal to the Russians. Will the Russians retaliate in a very significant way against Odessa and hurt Ukraine's Black Sea grain routes and their exports? Probably. And it might be why you haven't seen this previously, because actually it comes with a bunch of risks, not just the kind of moral risks I was talking about previously about, not sure you should be hitting commercial tankers from other nations. Okay, well, let's say these are Russian tankers, Shadow Fleet, they might have a Gambian flag, but really they're Russian tankers. But it's the retaliation side of things that could be controversial here, and you might start seeing Russia targeting other nations. But the thing with Russia targeting the ships of other nations is they aren't shadow fleets of the Ukrainians. They are genuinely the ships of other nations taking grain from Odessa out through the Bosphorus Straits and into the marketplace. So Russia will need to be very careful in how they retaliate here. But some pretty incredible footage coming out here. Reportedly, this is a photo of one of the burning tankers there. And then we have some footage from, I think, the people who were taken off the tanker. It might be, or it could be a Turkish ship, because they were trying to put out the fire. This is documentary footage of burning tankers from the Russian Shadow Fleet, the Virat and the Kairos, by all accounts. And here we have imagery of the crew being taken off, and clearly, well, not. I assume these guys aren't Russian who are crewing that one ship there. Now we have some footage, lots of footage coming out this morning. This is of the fires. The Turkish, I presume, Turkish trying to put out the fires on board one of these, a Kairos. The tugboat, the Kurtama 12, and the salvage vessel Nini Hatun spent the entire night extinguishing a fire, according to Supernova. It's reported that the second tanker, Virat, was attacked again this morning, 35 miles offshore. So there's a further claim that one of the tankers was hit for a second time. Now, this is the Virat attacked again this morning, according to the Turkish Ministry of Transport, and some images of strikes on the stern of the vessel there. Or well, in the second one, it's a stern, and then I'm quite sure it looks like the superstructure's on top there, so probably close to the stern there too. And then we see this. So this is evidence, I think, of it being struck again in the daytime. Spoo Sea Baby drones were behind the strikes. No, this could be that actually it was during the daytime yesterday that they were struck initially, and the first footage was coming out at nighttime, but they might have been attacked earlier, because these are thermal images, so I'm not sure what the time of day is here. Is that lights on board the ship there? Anyway, let's see. Of course, I was like, is there going to be music? Yes, of course there is. So anyway, Spoo's Sea Baby drones were behind the strikes on Russian Shadow Fleet tankers Cairo and Virat and in the Black Sea, and critically damaged both vessels and removed them from service, according to media reports. Let's see what the Ukrainians have released here. I mean, that looks like sunshine, doesn't it, on coming down there? So I presume this is during the daytime. And bosh. And then you have footage from another drone here as it approaches, and then a third drone here. Just incredible footage, really, of the destruction being wrought on this pretty sizable tanker as well. I wonder how powerful these explosions are and whether they can punch through the, I mean, clearly they must be able to punch through the hulls if then you have significant fires still raging. But yeah, a number of different shots here of, I don't know if these are the two different tankers or one tanker, but there you can see fire. But is that from the explosion? Is that from, that looks like it is leaking oil. I mean, when they say they're empty, I doubt it's going to be fully empty, and then it's got its own engine and oil for its own movement. So yeah, that is, either way, there's going to be some environmental impact from this, of course. But yeah, some incredible footage otherwise of these strikes on at least one of these tankers, maybe on both of them. So Ukrainians putting their Sea Baby drones to different uses now. So that took place last night, just absolutely incredible. And then we had a huge night of Russian missiles and drones attacking Ukraine. Ukraine did a pretty good job of intercepting them, as we often see with the more drones that are sent. The Ukrainians generally have a better interception rate, especially if they are sent at Ukraine. And it seems that at Kyiv. It seems that mainly they were indeed sent at Kyiv. Got some at south of Odessa, so that's I don't know. I think the Danube's down here, so I don't know that that's going to be Reni or Ishmael. It might Chornomorsk or somewhere. Anyway, you got Dnipro, you've got some frontline places like maybe Pokrovsk, maybe Kramatorsk, Slovyansk. Then you've got this area often gets hit. I'm not quite sure what is there. And then mainly at Kyiv, is that Chernihiv up here, and somewhere further to the east, to the west, and that's probably Starokonstantinov Air Base in Khmelnytsky. I assume that's what's being struck there. In fact, there were claims that Khmelnytsky Starokonstantinov was being attacked. AMK mapping was giving a chronological breakdown of that, and I think it was Kinzhal missiles that went there. And actually, if you see, one of 5 Kinzhals was intercepted, so 4 Kinzhals got through. I'm assuming the Kinzhals, well, you've got 2 going to Khmelnytsky, 4 apparently at Kyiv. AMK yesterday was saying that the one that I think he indicated 4 at Khmelnytsky, at Starokonstantinov. Anyway, who knows for sure. But 558 interceptions out of 596 drones is fairly good. That's, so what do we have? We've got 40. We've got, is that 38? 50 would be, yeah, that is 38. So 38 out of 596 is over 90% interception rate for drones. That's good, especially for the time of the war at the moment. 1 out of 5 Kinzhals isn't great, but at least they got one of them. These are supposedly, they're Russia's best missile. 12 out of 23 is not super good for the KH-101 Iskander-K cruise missiles. 4 out of 4 Iskander-Ms. These are ballistic missiles, a different type of ballistic missile. They're not air launch, they're ground launch. That's not bad. Well, obviously, that's not bad. That's 100%. That's brilliant. That is very good. And we have seen this a couple of times recently where they've had 100% success rate against Iskander-Ms used at Kyiv, where the Patriots or whatever have had a good success at shooting them down. I think the last time they were claiming Patriot had, I think it was Yuri Ignat that claimed the Patriots shot down 100% the Iskander-Ms. So then we have 50% the KH-69 or 59 guided aviation missiles. These, I think, are the stealth missiles. So these are cruise missiles that are also very difficult to shoot down by all accounts, but 50% there is, I guess, okay. So a number of missiles got through. So if we add up all the missiles, you got what, 28, 32, 36, so 36 missiles. And we have 13, 17, 19, 9, so just over 50% of the missiles shot down, which isn't great because these are going to cause quite a bit of destruction. But they've done a pretty good job of intercepting the drones. Now, in all honesty, I haven't seen a massive amount of battle damage assessment other than sort of some residential areas getting hit in Kyiv. And that does make me a little bit concerned that maybe a bunch of sensitive targets were struck. especially when you're talking about that number of missiles getting through. So I do worry for places like Starokonstantinov, but then you also would hope that they're used to that. And when those ballistic, although you don't have a lot of time to get to scramble your jets with ballistic missiles, right? And that's a problem. They're not like cruise missiles that are flying over land relatively slowly. These have a trajectory that's parabolic up and down, and my goodness, they come down quick. And so they need to scramble their planes within minutes, and I'm sure that they are very well versed in that now. But I just hope that Ukraine managed to get their planes up in the air, and that whatever missiles hit the Starokonstantinov air base either sort of missed or hit maybe the runway or whatever, and those things are easy enough to fix. But I don't know. Who knows? Because you're never going to get the Ukrainians admitting to what damage was done to places like Starokonstantinov. Right. Moving on, Zelensky said that the regime launched more than 600 drones and 36 missiles at Ukraine last night, hitting energy facilities. So it's clear that they were going for the energy infrastructure again, civilian infrastructure and residential areas. Several districts of Kyiv suffered damage to housing, with fatalities and many injured. Footage shows the Novorossiysk district. I mean, last I heard, there were at least 3 who had died, which, considering the sheer volume of drones and missiles, is not too bad. I mean, it's horrific, obviously, but it could be much worse. And it's difficult to know how much of the damage in Kyiv would be done by debris falling down from interceptions, whether it's electronic warfare or air defense, and how much was done by things hitting directly. Now, talking about missiles, this is a missile striking just meters from a car in Kyiv this morning, caught on video. Russia continues its campaign of terror against civilians, says Nell reports, targeting homes, infrastructure, and everyday life. So this is actually fairly good news, in my opinion. Like, if you have a big old missile slamming down in the middle of a cross section in Kyiv, then it's not hitting a huge residential building, it's not hitting military industrial complex, it's not hitting a military target. I'd much rather, obviously I'd much rather they just fell in a field out in the middle of nowhere. But if you're going to have a missile slamming down in Kyiv, I'd much rather it slams down somewhere like this, that, okay, it's going to cause injuries and deaths possibly, but they're going to be minimized in a strike like that. That's just my tuppence from just seeing that very quick bit of footage. Now, overnight, Russia launched a massive combined missile and drone attack on Kyiv. Cruise and ballistic missiles, including calibers and possible Kinzhals, struck residential areas and energy infrastructure. Explosions hit Nivki, Solomyansky, and nearby Vishneve. Western Kyiv is without power, so it has hit very important critical energy infrastructure. So don't think that Ukraine has got off scot-free. Of course they haven't. There will be huge amounts of damage done, but given the sheer volume of munitions sent into Ukraine, I think they've done a good job of intercepting. And then we have John Jackson here saying, well, Euromonitor Press first says, I talked about this the other day, to be honest, but I didn't give you any sort of video evidence or anything. So Euromonitor Press says a working Russian Grand 3 suicide drone was recovered completely intact, basically, by Ukraine, complete with a camera, a mesh modem, and a Chinese turbojet engine. A video from its camera confirms it's real-time capable. Now, I was talking about this with James from Why Ukraine, who fights now for Azov International Battalion. It's not published yet, that video. I need permission from his bosses, so they're just looking at the video, make sure that he didn't say anything he's not supposed to have said. But he was talking about how it's relatively easy for the Russians to hijack or to piggyback on the mobile phone network in Ukraine, because the mobile phone network is absolutely superb. So therefore, all they need to do is get hold of a SIM card, whack it on a drone like this, use that kind of mesh modem to use the mobile phone data network in Ukraine to navigate around Ukraine, and then it's got a real-time camera. So then you might have a bit of a lag back from the operator to go into the drone, but nonetheless it can be used effectively as an FPV drone. And this is why they're worried about these drones now being able to take out Ukrainian aircraft, like helicopters and jets that are trying to shoot these things down. Actually, they could be there could be a situation where you've got a bit of a dogfight happening. This is an intelligence goldmine, says John Jackson. Ukraine shouldn't be sharing this with the US absent some clear evidence of a shift in Ukraine's favor. This is solid leverage, is a claim there. I don't know. I imagine it's fairly basic tech that they are using, but using probably quite effectively. Now, a residential building in the Donetsky district of Kyiv was damaged in this morning's Russian strike. The attack left visible destruction, once again targeted civilian areas. I don't know if they are targeting civilian areas or whether they have something else in mind and they're brought down by air defenses or electronic warfare, but it's a distinction that isn't hugely, I think, important, because, you know, if the Russians weren't doing this, you know, if they weren't attacking Ukraine, there wouldn't be destruction to the degree that we see, of course. So it's irrespective of whether they're planning to hit that residential building or not. They hit it because they are throwing drones into areas that they shouldn't be. So completely, obviously, Russian moral culpability there. Kharkiv was also under attack. Massive electrical explosion flash there, and then it went dark. So evidently power was hit in Kharkiv too last night. Now, Friedrich Merz, the German chancellor, says, you know, Viktor Orbán's just been over in the Kremlin. He met with Putin for 3 hours. Was it yesterday? So Merz says, look, we have known Viktor Orbán's position for years. This is also not his first trip to Moscow. He already traveled to Moscow once last July, immediately after taking over the EU Council presidency. That visit back then was not only unsuccessful. A few days after it, there were some of the heaviest attacks on by the Russian army, including against civilian infrastructure and civilian targets in Ukraine. And of course, that's what happened last night. Orbán leaves, massive attack by Russia, rather similar to last summer. So, yeah, last July. After yesterday's visit of Prime Minister Orbán to Russia, Russia once again launched an attack on Ukrainian civilians, says Anton Gerashenko. Now we go over to what Ukraine achieved last night, and potentially quite a lot, as ever, including with the day before when there were huge attacks by Ukraine on Russia. We don't know, I'm sure, the half of it. So what do we know? Well, early on, we understood that Kazan had the same treatment as Kharkiv, with a big electrical explosion in the background there, and then losing power. So that's Kazan, probably a substation being hit there. Here we have some more footage, and just insanely bright blue explosion, and then the whole place goes dark. Bosh, straight away dark. So that was Kazan, and we have a little bit more from there. This is from within Kazan's city environs. Kazan is in darkness after a strike on Russian power, says Jason J. Smart. The war that Moscow started in Ukraine is now coming back home to Russia. So a big power outage there. Now, this is potentially one of the most significant pieces of news, other than the tankers being targeted, which I think is huge, as mentioned. I don't know what was struck here. There are several claims. A factory is burning in the territory of Alabuga, which produces car and truck batteries for all kinds of junk, like the Lada, etc. And then there were other claims that actually this was for batteries for making Shaheds or similar, or this was part of the drone Shahed manufacturing facility. This is potentially a really significant strike, or it's not that significant, but it shows that Ukraine can hit as far as the Yelabuga or the Alabuga Special Economic Zone, which is probably where this is. So I don't know if this is at the associated economic zone or whether it's actually at the production facilities for the Shahed drones. But this is the sort of thing I really want to be seeing. So that could be much more significant, or it might not be. Just don't know at the moment. But a huge potential strike there at Alabuga. Footage also footage emerging of the Afipsky oil refinery being hit last night, and that is a significant oil refinery, and it's not the first time this has been hit either. So again, some good success for the Ukrainians here. The Afipsky oil refinery in Krasnodar Krai was attacked last night. The facility, frequently used in Russia's military supply chain, has been targeted multiple times throughout the war. It's been hit again. You can see a large explosion and significant fire taking place there. I mean, yeah, you're hoping that this is, you know, some significant damage done to their production capabilities and capacity. So approximately 6 million tons of oil per year is sent through that facility, and that was, as we know, attacked with some success there. Now, Kyiv Independent reports this morning Ukraine attacks one of southern Russia's largest oil refineries and sparks a fire. Quote, explosions were recorded in the target area, followed by a fire at the facility, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces declared this morning. Now, Tim White has a bit of a synopsis on all sorts that are going on, so let's run through it. Let's start with the work of Ukraine's drones in the early hours. The General Staff confirms the known attack on the Afipsky oil refinery in Krasnodar. Last night, I also wrote about Taganrog and says it caused a fire in the repair workshop of the Beriev aircraft plant, so possibly more strikes on Taganrog Air Base and associated areas. Ukraine's General Staff also reports on a successful strike earlier this week in the port of Tuapse in the Krasnodar coast. The marine oil terminal was hit. We're going to come on to that. Then he talks about the tankers being struck. So one of the most remarkable developments yesterday was the Ukrainians taking their own direct sanctions against Russia's shadow fleet, with various countries breaching restrictions and others too weak to enforce sanctions. Ukraine intervened directly and published this video of an attack. Another attack that's not been confirmed by Ukraine yet is a hit on a Caspian pipeline in Novorossiysk. This is potentially controversial because if it's a Caspian pipeline, it might actually be owned by, is it Kazakhstan? And they might get a little bit upset about that. But it stops oil being loaded in the port of Novorossiysk. So not only they've taken out two of the tankers, but they appear to have stopped the oil facilities in Novorossiysk themselves from filling up these tankers. It came near Yuzhnaya Ozereyka. Marine drones reportedly struck the VPU-2 single point mooring, causing serious damage. Locals say oil is spilling into the Black Sea there, so unfortunately there is an environmental impact there. Ukraine's forces also worked on this video outlining the attack by their birds on the Afipsky refinery. So moving back from Novorossiysk to nearby Afipsky or in Krasnodar Krai. The plant produces aviation fuel and diesel, both crucial for the invasion and terrorizing Ukrainian people. Afipsky contributes over 2% of Russia's total refining capacity. A really significant, a number of different videos there spliced together to show that Afipsky was targeted. And we've got Kyiv that we know about. 600,000 people there did lose electricity. I don't know for how long in Kyiv. So obviously the energy infrastructure was very much targeted there. Don't know if there's anything else that's come out. A lot of other damage around Kyiv, as you can see. Different residential, commercial, I presume industrial properties being hit as well. Yeah, okay. Right. Just pictures from rescues in Kyiv there. So nothing else from Tim White for today. But there was more that Ukraine achieved last night. An electrical substation was on fire in the village of Dragnuska in Belgorod, just over the border there, after being attacked by Ukrainian drones. This looks like a fairly significant strike. Two fires going on separately, causing trouble there to the electrical, the power network. In fact, this image, I think, is fairly... well, it shows you. I didn't know whether that would, they look actually just like lights, to be honest, rather than fire spreading. But anyway, two separate areas there, as we saw from the other image, where one presumes the network has been hit. Now we're going to go back. Sorry, it's all a bit out of order. We're going to go back to Novorossiysk. Loading pier was destroyed as a result of the drone attack there this morning, said Special Kherson Cat earlier. According to Russian media, the attack occurred at approximately 4 a.m. The oil loading terminal was attacked by naval drones. So again, these USVs getting in and doing their thing. Operation of the oil loading terminal is now reportedly impossible. Really good news for the Ukrainians there, taking the law into their own hands, or not law, taking action themselves in terms of sanctions, taking sanctions into their own hands. That's it. So Novorossiysk near Yuzhnaya Ozereka, the Caspian Pipeline Consortium's single point mooring was attacked, according to Supernova. So the issue might be that it's the CPC, the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, and they are actually not Russian. They are, I think, Kazakh. So there could be an issue there. Unmanned boat struck the VPU-2 signal point mooring, causing serious damage. Locals report an oil spill into the sea there. And then as well, fire at the area of the Orsk oil refinery. I presume this is different from the Afipsky and different from anything else that was hit. So this is Orsk, which has been hit previously as well, just fairly recently, if I remember correctly. So there you go. Lots and lots that the Ukrainians were able to achieve last night, as they themselves are having to deal with a huge Russian attack. Ukraine struck 39 energy infrastructure targets across Russia in 55 days, and that's not including last night, including 12 power points and 27 substations with power plants, with recent focus shifting to 15 objects in occupied territories, including 3 power stations in Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea, OSINT researchers Oko Hora reported. So the Ukrainians definitely approaching this systematically with the power production, generation, distribution as well, and storage, as well as hydrocarbons, all of the above too. All of these different points on the on the chain of both hydrocarbon and energy production and distribution have been hammered by the Ukrainians. And so they've had a good time of it recently, but of course they themselves have been absolutely hammered by the Russians taking aim at the Ukrainian energy production and distribution. Right. So I don't know if last night could be seen as tit for tat. I still get a sense that even though the Russians sent in 600 drones and all those missiles, I think you get a clear sense possibly that Ukraine had the better night of it last night. That even with the Russians doing all that they did, the Ukrainians are like, we're going to hit that, we're going to hit that, we're going to hit that, we're going to do that, and we're going to do that directly. And here's the evidence, and bish bash bosh, there you go. And by the way, we can't let you know of some of these other things because Russians haven't recorded them and put them out on social media. And actually, we hear that WhatsApp has been closed down more formally, I think, over the last 24 hours by the Russians. They're really closing their net. So it's not just like that Russians are fearful of getting punished for sharing video, but actually it's far less, it's far more difficult for them to share videos onto international social media because the Kremlin has been working so hard to create only an internal system, a kind of intranet, and all new phones have these the Maxi, is it, app that tracks everything that the user does, and so it's way more difficult and risky for Russians to share the stuff that they used to have shared much more easily. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces. Whew. Right, Putin came out and said some stuff the other day, saying we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. If that's what they want, we're ready to do that. The Moscow exchange plummeted as a result of his speech. Jürgen Naudit says, well, today we all learned that they intend to fight endlessly in their bunkers just for the sake of it. The reaction was immediate, not in words, but in numbers. The market doesn't like Putin. And I think he's got a point there. Real plummet from the Moscow exchange, showing that I think they are in a spot of bother, economically speaking. Well, there's more data to support that. Russian VAT tax will be raised to 22% in 2026, up from the current 20%. Putin has signed that into law. The special military operation is going according to plan, says Anton Gerashenko, and the Russian economy is in amazing shape, it seems. Putin is willing to throw the Russian economy down a drain for his ambitions. Then we have Russia's largest bank, Sberbank, announcing last week that it intends to reduce personnel by 20%. That's around 50,000 people. They're going to be added to the, well, it's a double whammy, isn't it? So you take them out, the private. Okay, 3 things. 1, if the bank is in trouble, needs to get rid of personnel, right? So one financial sector is in trouble in Russia. So that's your first point. Second point, you're taking 50,000 people out of private employment and putting them into unemployment, which initially, at the very least, unless they can all go and get new jobs, initially it's going to be a real drain on the public purse, because you're getting income tax from these people who are working, and you're getting tax from all the things that they're buying, 20% of VAT and all the things they're buying. They now don't have a job, so don't buy as much. And also you're paying them unemployment benefit. So you're moving them from the private sector to not working. That has a double whammy effect on their on the tax receipts for Russia. Anyway, by the end of 2025, that 50,000 people will be gone from Sberbank, and the VTB group has now stated, so another bank, that it also plans to carry out large-scale optimization of personnel, as one does when business goes really well. So yeah, remember I reported sometime back, central bank discovered a 10 trillion ruble time bomb on bank's balance sheet. So the financial sector is not looking good in Russia at the moment. Now, moving aside away from the Russian economy to actually American economic blackmail's the wrong word, sweeteners. Michael Weiss is responding to the Wall Street Journal piece. Wall Street Journal have just released a big old article, "Make Money, Not War, Trump's Real Plan for Peace in Ukraine." The Kremlin pitched the White House on peace through business. To Europe's dismay, the president and his envoy are on board. So here's an article that says Russia is essentially bribing, that's the word, bribing the Americans with a peace through economic boon, and screw Ukraine. They don't need a just and lasting peace. We just need you to sign up to doing loads of economic deals with Russia, and then we'll get the advantage of a really terrible peace plan for the Ukrainians. And that's what the Wall Street Journal seems to have set out. Michael Weiss interprets this: "Dear Europe, if you read this and still think the United States is with you," and by the way, he's an American journalist here saying, "We are not with you anymore. The United States has hung you out to dry." He says, if you read this and still think the United States is with you, you deserve everything you fear is coming your way. This is Russian-style corruption incorporated into the American system. So I'm going to go through this article with you, I think, later if I can, although I'm presuming if I can't, no. Wall Street Journal doesn't archive. Usually I get these articles behind paywalls from looking at archived versions. Wall Street Journal is very hard to get archived versions. So I don't know if I can get that, but I'd like to read that article in full. Applebaum looks at this and says, and quotes from it, the quote from the article: "By dangling multi-billion-dollar rare earth and energy deals, Moscow could reshape the economic map of Europe while driving a wedge between America and its traditional allies." Read this excellent Wall Street Journal account of the business deals behind the peace negotiations. Another quote: "A question for history will be whether Putin entertained this approach in the interest of ending the war, or as a ploy to pacify the US while prolonging a conflict he believes is his place in history to slowly and eluctably win." A European intelligence agency distrusted a hard copy report in a manila envelope, a hard copy report in a manila envelope to some of the continent's most senior national security officials. Inside were details of the commercial and economic plans the US has been pursuing with Russia, including jointly mining rare earths in the Arctic. The point here is that the US is salivating at the prospect of making money with Russia and couldn't give one shit about Ukraine. Null Reports says of a Politico article, "The contents of the version of the peace plan for Ukraine are being kept secret," say European officials, "and much of Brussels remains in the dark." So this is the idea that this new updated plan from so you had the Russian plan that Witkoff devised with Kushner and Kirill Dmitriev, that was a 28-point plan that was to the benefit of Russia. Then Europe and Ukraine got involved and changed it. And now you've got this European drafted a 19-point plan, but it appears to have been changed again. And this version is not being shared with Europe. So the American negotiations between the Ukrainians and the US delegations have continued throughout the weekend, but even senior EU diplomats admit nobody knows what changed. So this is about Europe without Europe. Now, Russia is pitching a peace through business plan to the Trump team, says War Translated. Envoy Witkoff often offering sanctions relief and US investment in exchange for Ukraine freezing the front line and giving up NATO, a must read, really, given the ongoing circumstances. So again, I must read that article. Now, here we have another piece. Trump hands Putin Ukraine's occupied territories. And again, bad news coming out from the American side of things. The US is reportedly ready to recognize Russia's control over Crimea and occupied Ukrainian regions to push its peace deal. Witkoff and Kushner are in Moscow with the offer. So they are looking, the Americans apparently, to hang Ukraine out to dry again. Hey, Trump, peace is for Ukrainians to decide. They won't surrender just so he can stage another media win for himself. It's not a media win, although that's what he wants too. It's an economic win that's at the heart of it, I think. Now, all the while, Viktor Orbán from Europe, from the EU, and from NATO was in Moscow, kind of without permission. He doesn't need permission from the EU, but he didn't do any kind of talking to the EU and discussing whether this would be a good idea. After the war ends, Ukraine should be a buffer state, says Orbán. So again, it's this idea that, as I've talked about many times before, that Ukraine is seen as a pawn, not as a sovereign nation. You don't get to decide who you are, what you're going to be, and you have no sovereignty because we see you as Viktor Orbán, as a pro-Russian European and NATO state, sees you as a buffer state. He believes, Orbán believes, NATO and Russia should agree on the size and equipment of limited Ukrainian armed forces that could operate in the buffer zone. So not only are you a buffer zone, we're going to restrict what forces you use in that buffer zone. Guarantees must also be provided that neither side will subordinate this buffer state to its authority. Now, fair enough, then. This buffer state shouldn't just be under the authority of the Russians or NATO, etc., etc. But it's this idea that he just sees Ukraine as a buffer state. Now, Andriy Yermak has resigned, as we know. The Daily Telegraph says the resignation came after months of mounting foreign frustration with the head of the OP, the Office of the President. American officials across both parties had long viewed Andriy Yermak as abrasive and obstructive. One insider reportedly called him a bipartisan irritator. His role in arranging a disastrous Oval Office meeting with Trump and his decision to show Trump disturbing images of starving Ukrainian POWs badly damaged Kyiv's standing in Washington, apparently. Trump's officials advised Zelensky to fire him. European allies were also believed to have pushed Zelensky to let Yermak go, worried that his growing power, abrasive style, and links to the scandal threatened unity and accountability within Ukraine's leadership at a critical moment. So we saw a lot of pressure from Europe over the last few days to get rid of Yermak. As I mentioned last night, the problem is this is going to leave a hole in really Zelensky's life. This is a right-hand man that does a lot of heavy lifting for him. To suddenly lose him will be a real challenge for Zelensky. If Syridenko, the present prime minister, comes in to take his position, take Yermak's position at the head of the presidential office, does Zelensky have that relationship with Sviridenko? Does he have that reliance on her? Does she do the sorts of things? Will she do the sorts of things that Yermak was doing? No, almost certainly not. I think this is going to hurt Zelensky. You know, there are all the PR things. I'm talking about from a practical human point of view. Then we hear Zelensky's ex-chief of staff, Yermak, says he's going to the front, quote, going to the front after resigning amid corruption probe, quote, I'm going to the front and I'm prepared for any reprisals. I am an honest and decent person, said the former presidential office head, Andriy Yermak. Wow. That would probably be quite a clever move for him, by the way, in terms of PR. I think you can't get a kind of a better move than going to the front and offering yourself to fight for Ukraine, rather than, and I'm sure he wouldn't be right on the trench lines, but who knows? But rather than, you know, I'm going to go and live abroad in some kind of tax haven or something. Now, unfortunately, there are ramifications, as I said last night. The Czech Foundation that fundraised for a flamingo, and they did it so quickly and so effectively that Firepoint said we're throwing an extra one for free. The Czech Foundation has dropped the Flamingo missile donation amid corruption probes. That hurts. The corruption probe is hurting, and there's a real tangible way that it has hurt. 500,000 of fundraised funding has been withdrawn. Now, the US Congressman Don Bacon, who is a Republican who is against Trump's position on Ukraine, says Ukraine has a real and independent law enforcement and courts, unlike Russia, where people are thrown out of high-rise windows. He welcomed the anti-corruption probe into former presidential office chief Yermak. This is really the only way that if you're going to be pro-Ukraine, you can not so much sell this, but interpret this publicly. Independent law enforcement and judiciary is working in Ukraine. This doesn't happen in Russia. There, you get thrown out of high-rise windows. So yeah, it's good. NABU and SAPO are doing what they're supposed to do, which is rooting out corruption. And even if it goes right to the top, they are able to bring these people to justice, if indeed Andriy Yermak has done something wrong. So, you know, there is a positive to be drawn from this. Now, sources in Ukraine suggest more leadership changes. Yulia Sviridenko is likely to become head of the presidential office, while Mikhailo Fedorov is expected to take over prime minister. So I think he was deputy prime minister, was he? But he's certainly in charge of digital transformation. He's an effective guy, Fedorov, as far as I know. So that would make sense to me for him to be prime minister. And Sviridenko moving to the presidential office, and she's seen as pretty competent too. So, okay, he's also announced to Zelensky his delegation that's being sent to Washington, with Umarov at the top and a whole bunch of other people below. Now, Poland has detained 4 people after a wave of railway sabotage attacks last month. One, a Ukrainian, was holding 46 Russian passports. 46 Russian passports. He was just released by a court. Prosecutors have appealed. Oh, let him go. He's got 46 Russian passports, so yeah. Right, last thing I'm going to say, it's been a long one. Just keep an eye on this. Trump has announced today to all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above the surrounding Venezuela to be closed, and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJT. Don't want to release the Epstein files, so we're going to go to war with Venezuela. So expect war with Venezuela to start anytime soon. Anyway, that's enough for me. Really appreciate your support. Just going to see if anything else has come out of congratulations to Graham Phillips for achieving this first. Pro-Russia former civil servant becomes the first Brit to face Ukraine war crime charges over a clip of pigs eating dead soldiers. So he's a Scarecrow's journalist that has been, was he not involved in one of the interrogations, interviews of Sean Pinner when he was in captivity. So he's a bad apple, that Graham Phillips. Swedish foreign minister, it's obvious that Russia does not want peace. Absolutely. But I don't know if anything else is worth saying at the moment. Kazakhstan urgently activated alternative oil supply routes following the attack on Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal, Kazakh Energy Ministry said. So there you go. I thought that was Kazakh. Right. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Sorry, this was a long one, but there was a lot to cover. Thank you for your patience. Take care, and Slava Ukraini.